The continued evolution of man's upper nervous system is so plain, direct, point blank, and obvious that it must be obscured and made debatable to ordinary minds. Steeplejacks would never go to work if they realized the futility of height. A kid told his father, "The dumb don't like to be made light of." And the old man replied, "Then always pick on a fat one." Second verse, a father told his kid, "The dumb don't like to be made fun of, but that's all right, because the truly dumb are too dumb to realize you're doing it. And it doesn't matter nohow, since if you make fun of the dumb, you're dumber than they are anyway." Third verse. Third verse? Well, if you're desperate and dense enough to need one, make it up yourself. The world of the mind is the world that can never be, and is yet the one that can never cease claiming to be. Let's see any other creature match that. Fable. Local conditions said to life, "But men are doing the best they can," and life replied, "Not good enough." One guy said, "Guess which is my favorite quiz show and you'll win a prize." And the second guy says, "I don't know, which?" And the first guy says, "Me." Conversation in a car. "Daddy, how can men believe that they can actually change or be original?" "Son, when all the fish are blue, pro-green statements mean little." They rode for a while in silence, and the boy spoke again. "Daddy, talking to you is oftentimes even better than talking to myself." "I know, son. That's what real fathers are for." In quiet, a few more miles lapsed, and again the lad articulated, "Daddy, what have most fathers done with their brains?" "Well, son, now you've hit the heart of the question. To wit, are fathers responsible for the passing of intellectual energy to their heirs, or, when we say fathers, are we in truth speaking of the mind of the young?" Life normally offers authors the choice of writing the intro or doing the index. Only simple men stay on one-way streets, and the super simple, known as sophisticated, on two-wayers. Whenever he hated it, one man would say, "I love it." And when he understood even more, would only smile and say nothing. Yield, yield, and take yield. Told you. An in-town playing of the question and answer game. Question: why do men have history and education? Answer: so they won't realize how incapable of originality they are. Question: why do I have to ask? That's a rhetorical question, I assume. Hey, I was going to say that. Yeah, maybe in another life. Thank you, contestants. You may return to your skull now. First, men could spit. Then they could speak. Now they can spit again. One man claims that he takes all of the ideas he has related to one particular subject and puts them on a single sheet of paper, then cuts them up into separate pieces. And he was asked, "Do you call that thinking?" And he said, "No." And was asked, "Do you call it art?" And again he replied, "No, I call it a recipe." More unraveling of academia in the city. Definition: history. Gossip made acceptable. Conversation overheard in a park. If you could see your mind grow with exercise, same as you can with your muscles, athletes would become intellectuals. More than that, if men could actually see their minds grow through specific use, the parade itself would move faster. Yeah, now that you put it that way, I guess that explains it, right? Yes, except for the fact that you and I can even discuss the possible otherwise. The higher up squirrels climb, the less they remember of Egypt. After lifetimes of sitting beneath the tree, Buddha began to insist, "Let my mind go, for my mind is my people, and from them I wish to flee." Attentive forgetting is almost as good as having never known at all, which is a wise man's mental form of captivity. The difference between weirdness and real weirdness. Ordinary people can enjoy just weirdness, because even when weird, it still makes sense. But real weirdness, well, now that's another matter altogether. It's not enjoyed by routine minds because they never are even aware of it. Real mystics don't have to hide. That's why the fake ones have to dress up and act funny to get noticed. Life made one guy jumpy till he got enough of it and started making life jumpy. Whilst discussing the relativity of the connecting tissues that hold together man's sense of reality, a father said to his son, "Should you ever mistake a python for your whacker, you have either discovered the world's smallest reptilian constrictor, or you are the world's most favorably endowed." He goes on, "I want you to further note a similar relationship between what your mind thinks that it knows and what it believes itself ignorant of." One guy asked another guy, "Have you noticed that all criticism always comes after the fact of whatever it is being criticized?" Another guy put scratching, pondering finger to temple and thought, that would explain the low price of criticism. I mean, it being at least a day old and what. If you roll a ball around in your hand long enough, you'll begin to see spots you've already seen but now don't recognize, and see new areas that you believe you've already seen. As proof of this, consider the following. No one takes life seriously enough but mystics, and they take it too seriously. Or, take on this one. Ordinary people take life seriously enough, and they end up taking the wrong parts that way. Or, bounce this one around, it may be that life takes man too seriously, or else he mistakenly thinks it does. What do you think? Hey, toss that thing over here for a minute. If Shakespeare had sufficient clones, each with a fully loaded quill, they'd eventually all turn into monkeys. If there's any real justice in the world of cliches, that is. How to absolutely determine that you are mentally a native earthling. You wouldn't recognize originality if it came up and set your nose hairs on fire. The world of dichotomies is uniquely human and apparently exists in the difference between theory and practice, conception and execution. But that is not all that resides there. Also there is a real man's understanding, and also all around there and all beyond there. First guy says, "Example me, intellectual sophistication in action." And second guy replies, "A forcefully delivered cliche." The son of an actor one day asked his father, "Is there a script to life?" And the old man replied, "Better yet, ask, is there a director to life?" And the kid obliged, "Okay, is there a director to life?" Only to be told, "Better you should ask, is there a producer to life?" So the kid asked that and received the response, "Do you want to cut through the overture crap and get right to considering the normally unprogrammed Siamese connection between the actors and the audience?" No. This is why cities cannot build their more important institutions on twin hills. A creature circling Earth in an alien ship looked, pondered, then thought. If I could disassemble their words, I could free some of the horses from the carousel. But then, reflected he further, where would they go? This is why mystics can't use much help. The simple left to stand to their feet and vigorously nod their agreement to whatever is forcefully said. All confession is a whine in disguise. Hope. When dead, the simple always look better. Public notice. If you don't think about attention, you'll never control attention. Public notice number 2. If you only think what your mind naturally wants to think, you'll always believe that you actually are doing the thinking. Final public notice. Don't be a jerk. One man passed up the opportunity to be an actor, explaining that it was already hard enough pretending to be himself without having to pretend being himself, pretending to be somebody else. Absolutely final public notice. We're still talking mind here. Entertaining self-fulfillment. The simpler the mind, the more does the person wish to be taken seriously. Conversation in a forest between a lion cub and his father. Papa, why can you say things about human lives that are funny, but not about ours? Shut up and eat your game warden before he gets cold. The mystical turns into ritual at the same place understanding turns into attempted instruction. Spotter's Guide. You can always tell the Swedish, you can always tell the Dutch, you can sometimes tell a mystic, but you can't tell him much. Or else he ain't actually no mystic. Local conditions said to history, tell me when you lived, and I'll tell you what you know. All admission is dung in disguise. Does it take some nerve or what for people to check out books in a library on mysticism and such, or to attend some sort of weekend retreat and take it quite seriously in light of somebody like Buddha, spending 30 years almost killing himself, giving up that which ordinary people would die for? Is that some nerve or what? Oh, wait a minute. Well, hey, is it some stupidity or what to believe stories like that Buddha thing? Took you into a corner, but I got you out. Speaking of attention, which sometimes passes for or passes by the name of intelligence and mental activity and so on. Consider, people do not pay it any mind, but consider that continually people, even those that are assumed to be, accepted to be ordinary intellectuals, are apologetic whenever they are coming close or threatening to become instructive. You hear it constantly. I keep using TV as our most commonly shared example probably. But you can hear it, you can turn on the PBS stations, or you could go out, I can assure you, if you wanted to go to all the effort to leave your den and couch and go out in public, that you could go out to a weekend retreat with physicists And perhaps the opening speaker, he welcomes everybody and tells them what time the cocktail hour is going to be, and they're going to be on the beach and have a clam bake and this and that. And even now, I'm using that as an example of real city, normally perceived of, intellectuals. He will apologize in advance. He'll say, and by the way, when we start the clam bake, we've got Dr. So-and-so here, and I didn't really prepare it, but we might be able to get him to say something about the paper that's going to be published, the next quarter's issue of a British scientist. Maybe I didn't do enough theatrics. You understand? He's apologizing to other intellectuals like, I know we didn't come here for this. We came to have just a little fellowship and fun. And there's a continuing process, or you can watch a show that they continually do it, apologizing in advance to children, like they'll be promoting some new show, television show, and they'll say, be sure and have your little nippers watch it, and it's recommended by the National Education Association. It's been prepared by such and such leading experts in child development. And it's going to be entertaining. We're going to have such and such puppeteers, and they're going to be cartoons. And then they fall into a slight apologetic whine. They'll say, and we're going to slip in some sort of preschool. We're going to slip in. What they're saying is we're going to slip in that which would pass for some sort of attempted information or some educational thrust to it. And there it is. They're assuming. Now think about it for a second. Again, we're not attacking anybody, but think about it, as opposed to the commercial, run-of-the-mill entertainment networks. Here it is, the kinds of outlets in our society they're considered to be, assumed to be, and they take some of our tax dollars to be educational. And they will still apologize. What gives? That even amongst those that are perceived to be the intellectuals, they will apologize in advance. They will preface any attempted instruction, any attempted conveyance of any useful information. They will apologize in advance. Corollary. What the hell does a corollary mean? Corollary. I'm sorry, I happen to know the definition. I was going to give it, but probably not the right time. That kind of dry stuff. I was trying to be entertaining. Related to that is something that passes, as always, for other than it can be seen to be. Do you think I'll be attacked by those whose responsibility is the teaching of grammar? No. Whose responsibility it seems to be? Someone will make a public oral statement, or it can be in literature, but let's take a public statement. It happens continually, political campaigns, but all sorts of public utterances. But it'll be a political campaign. A man or woman will make a statement that sounds insightful. They will preface it by saying, I'm quoting now, as someone once said, if we do not preserve the future of the next generation, we can in no wise protect our present position. Or something that makes sense. Something that probably the smartest thing that ever came out of the man's mouth, and it does not have to simply be a politician. It could be any sort of speaker. Again, it's so common, you almost hear it as part of the speech itself or part of the comments. And it doesn't matter that the man didn't write it. He paid good money to some speechwriter to write it. He's not quoting anybody, but it is just a formal quotation. It is just an anonymous quote. But there he stands. And it can be, like I said, don't just take it as politician. It could be any sort of speaker. It could be a news commentator. Be a somebody in office, somebody in government. It could be somebody in some academic field, a psychologist, a historian, an anthropologist. And they will start off a comment. It's like their best shot, and they will not, even if they wrote it themselves or paid to have it written, and now they own it, they will not take credit for it. And yet they either know or they've been convinced that this is going to be your best opening salvo, is to say, come out and they introduce you and say, as someone wisely once said, blah, 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 blah. And he either hears it, he takes their word for it, but let's assume he's intelligent enough that he hears it and he thinks, I'm impressed with that. Or if you want to really get it good, if you're following this at all anyway up until now, make it simpler. First man could spit. Maybe he wrote it himself. And that's assuming that he is intelligent enough at the ordinary level to have written some insightful, almost an instant cliche, a memorable phrase. And he wrote it himself. You just do not normally pay attention to it, but it is almost a rule that a man will not take credit for it. That he will, even if he wrote it himself, he will open up and say, thank you for inviting me here, and my subject is so-and-so. Okay. As someone once said, and he will say the very thing that he wrote, but he will say as someone once said. And it may be that he, just as he has predicted to himself, people take notes. And after it's over, sure enough, a reporter comes up and says, would you repeat that? That's going to be, if I get this report, this article, if they accept it, I'm writing about you, that was going to be the opening. That's going to be my opening sentence. I'm going to extract part of that and use it as the heading of the story. And he will not take credit. What gives? Is there a fear of men being original? Skipping the problematic possibility of them actually being so. But if someone believes they are, if the man's sitting there and he believes that this sentence came to him that we must preserve the future of the next generation or else we are not protecting our own present position. Let's say that whatever leads him to that, it comes to him and he is just struck by it. Why do men in general fear? If you don't like fear, fill in your own word. Hesitate. But it seems to almost be a fear, because you would think, if you looked at this in any sort of reasonable way, why would not the man take credit for it? He either wrote it, he had a group of speechwriters, it's all the same thing, and even if they told him that they agreed this should be your opening line, this should be the theme of the speech tonight. This should be the theme of your campaign if he was a politician, and he listens. And if he's a good politician, he got no opinion, no taste, no intelligence, and he says, is it really good? And they say, yeah. And he looks around, he's got 4 or 5, because you don't really have speechwriters unless you got more than one. Because you got one, you got to take his word for it. And anybody that's stupid won't take one other stupid person's word. Well, they assume one other person's stupid also. And so the man has to look around and says, are you guys sure this is a great thing? And the guy that wrote it, the first 2, they go, yeah. And he'll immediately look to the others, and they go, oh yeah, we agree. We had an alternative. Us over here group, Team B, we're writing another opening line, but once we heard that, no, there's no doubt, boss. And he goes, you guys are sure? And they'll go, oh yeah. So, in other words, he's sure. Now, he paid for it. That's the way politics works, or many people who are not politicians pay to have speeches ripped. Why would not the man? He's apparently trying to appear intelligent, insightful, the kind of person that's seeking your vote to lead us. And his opening statement is hopefully planned to be something that's going to strike at the heart of the potential voters, and people go, what a man. I mean, that he can see this. And the sons of bitches are almost, with few exceptions, loath to take credit. Another one I have hit you with several times, that my impression being that no one has fully choked on it yet. I mean, digested it. Is all forms of education, which is a form of history, which is a form of sanctity at the ordinary level, which is a form of intellectual continuity, the same as we need genetically. I say the same as we need, we got it whether you like it or not. But the same way that children, humans when they mate, only produce other humans. Well, with perhaps a few exception, but normally one species produces only that species physically. Those of you that took that personally may assume it was a joke. Assuming you have the intelligence to know what a joke is. That kind of continuity, you've got to see, is necessary for life to stay stable at any physical level. But there's also a kind of stability via continuity that is necessary in the intellectual world. In one sense, all of history is just absolute, if you could see, and I hate to say this, but you know by now that all of this is allegory. Well, not all it's allegory, but all of it's words, which is almost worse. All history, everything that anybody's ever known is just absolute bullshit, if you can think. Now, it can be entertaining. You might prefer to read history to National Lampoon or Vogue magazine. But it is a hobby. I assure you that if you could think in an area of the mind, if you could undergo said Buddha's night of renunciation, that you just abandon all old thought. Well, which ones exactly? We've been through this before, you stupid son of a bitch. You don't listen. What? Hurry up, nature game warden. Nothing, well, I'll make more out of it in a sense than there is. First off, I assure you that if you can ignite your brain, if you suddenly joined in Buddha and reliving yet again the moment of enlightenment, the reaching of the Buddhahood, the renunciation, and it's a silent renunciation, remember. He did not get up and say, "Boy, God, I'm renouncing all this." No. When you understand what it is, you get up. You no longer have to sit there. You no longer have to starve yourself. You don't have to do any of that stuff that anybody else is doing. But you don't get up and say, "Now I know better." Because if you get up and say, "Now I know better," you don't know better. You may be able to start a new religion, but you don't know any better. I said I was going down, maybe making it too complicated, figuratively speaking. See, first off, you understand that everything you thought, just forget it. It's just irrelevant. I can say it's wrong because that gets people's attention, and it seems to be that at least you can stand there. If I say, all right, everything you ever thought, from a mystical way, from all of this idea of some sort of secret kind of effort that will put you in a new state of consciousness, yeah. All right. Let me tell you this. Anything you ever thought it is, anything that you think the enlightenment shows or that moment, anything, yeah, it's wrong. And you go, "Well, you don't know what I think." And I go, this is an old story, by the way. And I go, "Well, it doesn't matter what you think." You could say, "Well, you don't know whether I have a Buddhist background or a Hindu background or a Jewish." And I say, "Well, that doesn't matter." And you say, "Well, yeah, but you don't know whether I'm Nigerian or whether I'm Norwegian." And I go, "It doesn't matter." And you go, "Well, you don't know whether I'm educated or non-educated." It doesn't matter. And then it sounds like almost something came out of a Zen fortune cookie that says, no matter what you've ever thought before the Enlightenment, it was wrong. I mean, it just sounds so neat, and it sounds like a quick dagger you can give to everybody. Then somebody says, "Well, I've always believed that the whole idea of enlightenment is some sort of plot or some sort of gift brought to us by aliens from other planets." You can go, "Well, okay." You say, "Except for this. No matter what you think it is, everything you ever thought's wrong." And so then you can turn and walk away if you're playing that kind of game. It just sounds so, it's wrapped up better than a fried weenie sandwich. Just rolled up on itself, tied up in wax paper. It seems to be, take that. And it is. Except people then want to discuss it. Well, which parts? But anyway, back to, you first find out the renunciation it is the discrete, it is the distancing, it is a distinct separation from everything you thought before. And everything means everything. That's why they don't call it Buddha's night of selective renunciation. Or Abraham didn't take it upon himself to destroy all the idols, which you can look at as being unrelated, chaotic thought. There he was in the business, his family, of building idols, And he one day decides to break up all the idols. He wasn't known later as Abraham, the selective idol breaker, or Abraham, the guy that fearlessly broke up some of the idols, the ones he didn't like. Or you didn't have a Jesus coming along and they're referring, a man must be, kind of born again in, certain ways. Not all of him, but, maybe just part of it. There were no conditions to any of this. It is a distancing. It is a distinct separation from the past. Up here. Down here, I guess into the shock that you may or may not be able to put into your next system. But that you do not start off there. If you identify with that, you'll end up hanging in with the rituals of trying to lose weight. You go through what Buddha symbolically went through, of following all of the physical rituals of starving yourself, going naked, wearing clothes, sleeping, not sleeping, doing all of that. Back to, believe it or not, when I said that perhaps I was making it figuratively speaking, more complicated it is, you first distance yourself, that is, you realize everything that you personally thought up until now, and there's no good word for it, I just say you distance yourself. The term Buddha's renunciation sounds good, but you don't turn on yourself and go, you old stupid son of a bitch. That's why I make up these little stories about a guy talking to his mind and saying, you idiot, and all that. And that's why you laugh. You don't know it yet. Your mind's not an idiot. It's named worth, it's a child. For those of you who don't figure all the stories about a father and his son. At any rate, the renunciation is a separation. You just leave it. The bulkier side of that is also where we started, believe it or not, is you understand it's not just you, it's everybody. It's why history, all of education, or what appears to be, I'm sure to some of you, if you're ordinary, it sounds like some sort of incomprehensible kicking I continue to do at what I've been calling civilization. And I've tried to explain to you what civilization actually represents. But it's everything that's happened before. You don't renounce it because, again, you're in favor of it. Or else you're not even a mystic. You're not even walking around sane. But especially if you understand anything, you're all in favor of everyone else being sane and honest and decent. Whatever religion they claim to be, you no longer have any preference. You just hope you're in favor of people being religious because it keeps them in their place. Keeps them kind of sane and you don't have to worry about them that much. It's good for everybody except you. And it's not bad for you, it's irrelevant. But the point is, you then have, there's nowhere to look. It's not just that everything you know is now irrelevant. I'm going to stop one more time. I know some of you probably think you see it yourself, and this is redundant. It's not that you look back at everything you thought, all of your ideas, whether you believe that the way was to be a Buddhist, or if you did at some time believe that voices were talking to you from Atlantis, or that, whatever. It's not simply that you look back and go, well, thank God I'm no longer that big of an idiot. It's none of that. The renunciation is just a figure of speech. It is simply a separation. It is what is represented that Buddha did get up, or Jesus and many other religions, every one of them, have some idea of a twice-born man. A second kind of birth, that you are somebody new. And again, they end up at the only thing that ordinary people require is all these rituals of Hindus putting on certain clothing at a certain age of 12, and they call themselves, now you're a twice-born Hindu. You were born a Hindu, but that was just a matter of fate, just a matter of geography, a matter of culture. You were born here in a Hindu family, you're a Hindu, and a Jew. If you're born with, if you're Jewish, but you're not really Jewish until you go through like a second. It's a Jewish form of confirmation. It really makes up the religions that, bar mitzvah, that you take on responsibility. Yeah, I was a Jew, but I couldn't help it. I was born a Jew, but now I'm one of my own doing. Or the Catholics, the confirmation, or the Protestants, the baptism, which really gets into it, especially the real fundamentalist Baptists, instead of just sprinkling a little water that you can wipe off. And, it's actually submerging yourself, which many religions, not just Christianity, but as you know, that seems to be, and they refer to it, and they'll try to build up, want you to fast the day before you do it, and they go through procedure, and you put on a certain kind of robe, and they take you to a certain place, and they claim it's holy, or they dedicate it to the gods, and they actually submerge you. And then when you come back out of the water, you are a new man. They say, do you believe in Christian quarter, they'd say, do you believe in the laws of our church? Do you believe that Jesus was the Son of God? Do you believe in the only one God, etc.? And you go, yes, yes, yes. They go, all right. And they put you, actually submerge you and bring you out and what it's supposed to represent. In fact, they want to push it a little bit further and say it actually happens if you believed it. That you are now a new man. Not a partially new man. You are a new person. But notice it is very physical. And all they do is physically do it. The renunciation is a separation. It is an abandonment. Not a hostile abandonment. It is not you winning some battle up until the point of a kind of night of renunciation, of the Buddhist, the moment of enlightenment, the epiphany, the being struck down of being Saul coming to persecute the Christians, being struck down there in the middle of the road on the way to do them harm, do them more harm, and you wake up and you're no longer Saul, you even have a different name, and you're no longer persecuting them, you're now out there supporting them. That sort of thing that just happens, that seems to be an instantaneous, as it's always described, it is not. Up until that point, it seems like a battle. To those doing it, I don't mean to confuse the stories of people like Paul, that seems to be a spontaneous conversion of some sort or enlightenment. But people who work for it, and it just seems to happen, up until that point, they would say it was a struggle. Buddha would have said, well, yeah, I've been struggling here for 30 years, trying to figure this out and trying to do all this stuff, and now it hits me. And so up to that point, people would say it's a struggle. If you just ask somebody now that goes off on weekend retreats or they go to some Zen weekend group and they sit. And they would say, well, it is a struggle. It's a struggle to still my mind. It's a struggle not to eat meat if they're vegetarians, whatever it is. And they say it is a struggle. But even here, it appears to be a struggle up until it happens. Then the renunciation, the word, as I said, is somewhat overblown. Because it's not that you think, I've won. I hate to describe more in words. It's not that you won. It's then you understand what the struggle appeared to be. You understand yourself, what the basis was. Of course, you really understand, to really play, let's throw Zen down and do a fandango dance on it, is then you understand immediately. Buddha and everyone else did at the time. Then they understood where everybody before them went, what it is you're trying for, I can't explain it to you. Assuming that somebody that had it can expect him. Now, that's another one of those that sound like one of those little knives you can use on everybody, and they say, well, if you really know what that kind of thing is, or the secret, won't you tell me? And the guy says, well, without me saying I know, let me put it this way. I'm convinced, or I've been told by people wiser than I am. In other words, he protects himself. Well, he gives you what you're used to. The point is, he would say, listen, they all tell you it can't be described. And you think, yeah, oh boy, is that a way out? But I assure you that's the first thing that all the Buddhas and Abrahams and Jesus, the first thing, when they see it, the first thing they think, beyond anything, trust me, the first thing they think is, ah. And the ah to themselves is, ah. And they don't say anything. Because then it could start the cycle going. If Buddha had been sitting there, to use that story, and it could actually show, and one of those monks that was somewhere close, and that kind of effort was there, and he went, wait a minute, you don't trick me. You saw it, didn't you? And let's just say, I'm just making this up, and let's say that Buddhists, they've been buddies for a while, and Buddha goes, and kind of gives him a look like, He goes, well, God damn it, tell me something. And for the first time in his life, assuming he still has some respect for the guy and understands that he had some promise, for the first time, he got none to tell him. Because if he just said this, because I'm telling you, the first thing he realized, just before the monk said, hey, it happened. Just before that, Buddha went, Follow my little scenario. This monk sitting there next to him goes, wait a minute. You just had it. Tell me what it is. If Buddha even said this, because the first thing Buddha thought was, I'm assuming by you know what I mean. He then understands why everybody told him, you can't put in words. And he'd heard that all of his life. Yeah. And he suddenly saw it, and the first thing he thought is what I mean when I would go, Now follow the scene. This monk standing there, he goes, you saw it. It happened. And he goes, He said, well, tell me. What if Buddha told him the very first thing? What if he said, tell me the first thing you saw? You just had it, didn't you? You saw. And he went, yeah. He said, well, what was it? Well, the first thing you saw was, you can't tell anybody. You can't describe it. So if he went, but he would have contributed even if he turned around and went, They're right. And the monk goes, what do you mean they're right? Tell me something. He says, because in a sense, that's the only right thing that has ever been passed down. Is to say, well, you can't describe it, which doesn't help. I know people write that down. I've seen people had it tattooed or, hem stitched or what you call it, embroidered, and they hang it up on the wall. That, the secret cannot be put in words. That's as old almost as the whole idea of some new form of consciousness. But what does it tell you? The truth is, as far as it being informative or helpful, nothing. It can sound clever. It can also sound clever to say two tastes in one, or whatever, some advertising slogan. Faster than a speeding bullet. You can think, boy, that's clever. But to say the secret is the secret, or the real secret is secret because it can never be put in words. And you feel like, oh, God, that's heavy. But does it help? It can entertain, but does it help? But the point is, the first thing you see is, there is no past yourself. You understand everything I thought. I'm going further than most people, but hell, it's not going to hurt you, is it? Life takes care of itself. It affects people's hearing. You understand. If you had the experience, if you can ignite your brain in that place, and you go, you understand that everything you thought before then, agreeing one more time, it sounds so bombastic, it sounds so pseudo-mystical and strange to say, well, everything you knew before then was irrelevant. I mean, it makes you go, I knew it. I knew I shouldn't have tried to be a Jew or a Christian, or I knew I shouldn't have tried to be a decent person. No, it's not that. It's just, you get it. The story, I'll go back to Buddha, I could use, but he got up after 30 years. Of course, he sat there for whatever the hours were, but there it was, 30 years of sitting. Ends up, almost killed himself, tried everything in the world, listened to everybody, tried it all, obviously had the ability to do it, but then finally got to the spot that realized by following everyone else's ideas, the best mystical minds of his day and time, he realized, I've gotten to the point I'm so weak I can't even walk. And he sat down and thought, something's not right. I am not only no more conscious than I was, I'm barely alive. The renunciation and all that, and the standing up. It's like he stood up. He didn't stand up. He didn't stand up and say, well, screw the Hindus, screw all the priests, screw everybody that told me this. He got up, no matter what the stories tell you now. I assure you, he got up, and he had nothing to say. He got up. He may have smiled, thank you, but no one was there, so you don't know. My story about a monk sitting there, there was nobody with him. Even if they were, when that happened, he got invisible. I'll leave that to you science fiction freaks. At any rate, he got up, and what getting up represented, he did not get up, and intellectually, verbally, he did not turn back around and dump on the past. He did not say, screw everybody, and how dare them mislead me. He got up and walked away. That's the renunciation. He just got up and left it. But, now here's the other part that I was trying to, as I said, make it chunkier for you, since we missed the blues festival there, to flesh it out. Is it not just you? Don't get up and just walk away from you. You get up and walk away from that which seemed to be the not you. You walk away from everyone else. It's his ideas. It is why history, education, knowledge, it's just all bullshit. It is necessary, though, but it is meaningless once you see what life is about. It does not mean that it's not entertaining, and it does not mean that it is not cogent for our ordinary existence, that ordinary people need it. You would never, a Buddha or somebody does not get up and go, wait a minute, not only did the religious priest mislead me, now that I see what life's about, I got news for you folks. The whole idea of being a decent citizen, of just being a decent family person, of trying to be educated, you're being misled. No, ordinary people do need it. You needed it up until that point. You can say, well, I didn't like it. You did it. Up until that point, when you get free from it, you do believe that everything that's going on at least indirectly, is subtly contributing to you getting better. That you might even say, well, I know some of these strange books I read, and I go to weird seminars and things, and I can't say that all of them directly help me, but it's obviously all playing into the game. It's this kind of belief amongst would-be mystics and occultists that everything you do is in some way sort of leading up to that one moment they used to love to say is when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And it's like, well, I may be wasting my time, but I'll keep working out because eventually, see, they never talk about the information, not the would-be occultists. It's always back to a personification. It goes from a verb to a noun. That once the student is prepared, and that's all I can do, I got to keep working, reading the books and going to all these lectures and stuff. But when I'm prepared, when the student's prepared, I heard this, I read it, the teacher will appear. Of course, those of you who like that might recall the guy I used to know that when he didn't have anything better to do and there wasn't anything good on TV, would hang around the occult section in libraries and catch poor people. And they'd be over there studying books or in the files, and he'd go up to them and just stand behind them, and he could do it. He'd say, "We're still watching you." And he'd sort of pat him. He'd say, "It won't be long now. We'll be in touch." Imagine that. I can't defend him, but never mind. But it's the idea that all of it is contributing. And in a sense it is, if you want to look at it that way. But if you'd like a little presage to how you would look at it later, you can say, well, everything I'm doing now is sooner or later, if I'm able to expand my consciousness, if I'm able to ignite the nervous system higher, then everything I'm doing can't be a waste of time. Okay. I mean, I'm trying to get there. I'm just having to stumble, make my way. So once I'm there, won't everything that I've done look like it did contribute, at least indirectly? Yeah. But I got another way to look at it. Put to you. Instead of looking at specifically of all you did, you're alive. Yeah. Well, that really contributed a lot. I'm suggesting to you that that's sort of the way to look. That's the kind of renunciation. It's not that you look around and go, well, boy, it all paid off. I know I've read some weird books and now I see it's not true, but they helped. It's not that you say that, nor is it you go, wait a minute, now I see what the secret is. It's got nothing to do with that kind of shit. It's not that. It's just you walk away from it. And so I was putting it to you a better way than even thinking now, well, all of these efforts I make, and I take a little dope now and then, and I will try and sit down and meditate, or sometimes I'll try to make strange sounds and put myself in some sort of sympathetic vibration with the people on Mars. I know they're there sometimes. Instead of saying, well, all this is going to contribute, being alive is going to contribute. That's known as too obvious, point blank, and in your face. That's why you don't find that sort of information readily available in your mystical box of Cracker Jacks. Just being here contributes. But then if you're real sharp, you could then want to say, well, as opposed to... And you'd stop the sentence about there. If you had any sense, you'd walk away. Why is it, back to the beginning, why is it that men apparently fear even being seen as original? I know that was a sticky one. That's why I apparently got off the subject and started all these examples, making up stories of Buddhas and Jesus. Everybody likes that shit. Back to, and you don't have to look at politicians or public speakers, look at you. Look how often you write down something that somebody said. Look how popular it is to read a quote or try and remember that somebody says, well, so-and-so, and you go, God, I like that. Or go look how many books there are. Quotations, famous quotations for public speakers. Politicians, speech writers' offices are full of those kind of stuff. And people will not take credit for it. They continue to look, and life provides even an intellectual explanation for it. That we should. I'm sure there's a cliche, I'm sure there's a quotation to cover this. I just don't know what it is. But I'm sure there's a quotation somewhere that says, well, we have squandered our past. We've squandered the best in our past. Should we forget it? No, we've squandered the best in our past. Should we neglect to quote the great minds who've gone before? Well, should. In fact, I want write that down. I like that. It does seem important. It does seem that it amounts to something that you can pull out. You're talking about some current event, and you can pull out a pithy, pertinent phrase from the writings of Aristotle and say, see, that kind of intelligence does not go out of style. That kind of insight into how a decent citizen, a person who appreciates truth and beauty, should behave. And you quote them. It is necessary. It is a part of the underpinnings of this kind of intellectual highway, this parade, what seems to be the progress of man. Back to my question to you. Why is it, even if a man apparently has written something original, either that or paid for it, and it's his, but even when he has made it up himself, they will insist upon, with very few exceptions, circumstances have to be in a very specific way that I'm not going into, it's not all that important, but they will consistently attribute it, even anonymously. As I told you, they'll say, well, as someone once said, and after it's over, you might go, I sure like that opening comment. Do you know who it was exactly? And he's standing there knowing that he wrote it, or one of his speechwriters did. And he'll go, well, no, that's, it's one of those things, I guess it's just axiomatic, but now it is proverbial in the real sense of the word. Now I guess no one knows anymore. It's just, it is so insightful. It's the sort of thing that's probably been handed around from, you just start anything. And now you stand, or this guy, and he wrote it. And there's apparently, if you don't like fear, there is a continual, a constant hesitation on men's part to apparently even be involved with anything original. If that strikes you too strange, I can bring it home in a completely different way, to many of you in here. Look at the kind of proverbial distrust that the bourgeoisie have of artistes. They do not trust them at all. They don't live next door to them. They don't want their daughter going out with one, a painter, a writer. And they may have some excuse, of course, because they're normally somewhere outside the mainstream of behavior. And they may say, well, I think the guy's on dope, or I just don't like that kind. He doesn't have a decent job. He's weird. I know all that. But think about it from this other way. Ordinary people, even those in the field of academia, even those that are supposedly intellectuals, those who are apparently leaders. It's the politics to you. The real example is the one I've beat you with before, and I believe it still evaded you. Look at part of what religion is based upon. It is a continual, socially acceptable form of plagiarism. It's the same thing as education. I don't mean it's any worse. Except with ordinary people, those who are still wired up simplistic enough to believe that there's some sort of force in which they can get in contact that is outside a closed system. Now, the idea of a God, a noun. The whole idea, or part of the whole use of it, is always having the Word of God, always having Holy Writ, Holy Scripture. Because, it's one thing, back when, amongst people who are still wired up to accept religion as being of greater importance than ordinary entertainment and information, they can apparently stand on greater authority and attempt to wield a greater figurative sword than a politician or an intellectual. That an intellectual can get up and say, well, here is the latest thinking. Not just my opinion, but here is what we now think in the field of psychiatry as a whole, at least in the Western world. Here is our current thinking. I refer you to Dr. So-and-so's paper in conjunction with the staff at Harvard and et cetera about the psychiatric causes of antisocial behavior in children. Whatever it is, you got something you can say. A politician can say, well, look at our Constitution, look at what our forefathers, look at what Thomas Jefferson, look at what Olivier, is it Olivier? Look at, little humor, look at what our forefathers had to say. Religion, look at what God said. Hey, don't blame me. I'm telling you, folks, you cannot go around living the kind of loose sexual lives you do, but hey, don't you just say it's because of me. We're talking about God said it right there. Well, I got the page marked. You want to read it for yourself? You got a Bible. You got a Quran. Look right there. And there's not much of an answer to that. Unless you're outside the mainstream of that part of life and you just stand and go, well, that's just a bunch of shit. If you're part of the mainstream, even if you're not religious, whatever the religion was, you are, shall I say, also very hesitant to stand up and go, what do you mean God said that? Somebody told you that. They put that book together. They voted. They get together. It was an election to decide which parts to leave in. It's been translated 15 times. You're going, if that was God, why didn't he put it in all the same language? All kinds of smart-ass stuff like that, see. But people won't even do that normally, even those that would think that. Look at the power. Now, an ordinary person, the ordinary religious, not the same circumstance, they would want to jump in if they were listening to all this, go, yeah, the power is, they're afraid. No, you kind of missed it again. Of course, being religious, I'm not surprised you missed it. But you kind of missed it. It's the sense of authority. And it seems like, well, it's one thing to quote Thomas Paine and to say, well, we should live our lives in such and such way, or Oliver Wendell Holmes said the judicial system, we should have laws in this country that says so and so. That's one thing. If you're civilized and fairly sophisticated, you could be impressed by Oliver Wendell Holmes. He was quite a little axiomatic maker himself. But if you're also civilized, just in a general sense, being impressed by Oliver Wendell Holmes or Thomas Jefferson is one thing. But God. But what is it all? It's all that you are still tied to this line. You have not experienced Buddha's night of renunciation. You have not been reborn. It is a complete, I know the words fear, hesitation, doesn't seem to be a lot, but it is a complete lack then of any attempted originality or creativity. A total lack. Think about it. And religion, again, is just the best example. Not because it's worse. But people who say that my life is religion, that I am a priest, I'm a rabbi, or else I'm a civilian, but I live as best I can. From morning to night, by the Quran, I am a Muslim, first and always. And that sounds, if you're living in that environment, you're all in favor of that. You want everybody to be a good Muslim. But now, from the view that if you could ignite your mind somewhere, your brain in another area, do you understand that is a complete relinquishing of any possibility of being creative? And if you were ignorant enough that you try and point that out to a good Muslim, you understand, because you ought to be lost in your own brain. How can I do it? They could point out to you the fallacy in that. They go, well, yeah, I don't try to be original if it's in contradistinction to what Allah said. If it contradicts the Quran, it's not original, it's not creative. It's error, it's folly, it's sin, it's foolishness. I told you not to talk to them like that, see, because they got you. In a closed system, everybody is a rat in a laboratory. Everybody's a laboratory. Everyone is a rat in a maze in a laboratory, and everyone is a maze. Did you say a maze? No, a maze. In a closed system, you can prove anything. And in a closed system, you do not have to be original. In a closed system, how are you going to be original? It's a part of the lab that nobody else goes into. Nobody's even ever turned on the lights there. They keep playing with rats over here, and they write a paper about why rats, if the temperature is taken up to over 72 degrees, they'll all run to the left in a maze. 6 years later, they're making progress. A man finds out that's true unless you put a green light bulb in the lab, and then they will run, most of them, or 72.9% will then run to the right. Now we're getting somewhere. If there is one definition, or another definition, I'm stopping. We got 30 seconds. How about another definition? Could even be the ultimate definition of a mystic. I put it to you as a rhetorical question. Someone who does not fear being original. Someone who does not fear creativity. And I know that the world is full of people, would be artists of all stripes, that would go, well, that's foolish because I don't fear it. I try my best to be. Look how weird I act. I know. Has it worked? If I was stupid enough to go on, they go, well, no. But I liked weirder. See, that's not the same thing. People would say, yes, I want to be creative. I want historically to the past, which is the only way you can. You rely upon what you've already thought, and if you have any doubt, of course, you rely on what other people thought to help support it. At least I'm not crazy. Hell, Plato said the same thing. God said it, so hey. Perhaps the only person, a mystic, who does not fear creativity and originality. Good night.